Oh boy. Good morning, Revolution, everybody, and welcome to our stream. Good morning, Pooja. Good morning, Bobby, and good morning, Bernard. Great to see all of you this morning. We are streaming on X and on, on YouTube and on Twitter. If you like the show, if you like what we're saying, please let others know. Share it, subscribe to the page, and don't wait. Do it while you're thinking about it. Do it now. Today we are talking the about the U.S. working class, the state of the labor movement, and general calls for that are emerging in different quarters for a general strike. In fact, I just saw the other day that there is such a strike that's being planned for August the 9th. I don't know who called it. I don't know what the demands are. You see, national strike, shut down the country. Um, but the call has been made, and it's not the first time. And so we're going to be talking about that and a little bit more. But first, Bobby, tell us how you're doing, what's going on in Chicago, and you know what kinds of things is the party involved in now?
Well, it's hot here in Chicago, and we're certainly experiencing global warming. Um, but things are heating up politically too. Um, for example, we're facing a huge attack on our newly elected mayor. It's very coordinated. I think it's being led by the Chicago Tribune, actually. Um, but while the mayor has been trying to, to have programs in place to really change the homeless situation, to treat people with dignity, to have full funding for education, the city has taken a very principled position in defense of immigrants, and our people overall are scared to death of the upcoming Medicaid cuts. And amidst all that, we find the mayor under attack, and the attack seems to be coming from corporate forces that really don't want to see money spent on working class people, and certainly don't want to pay their fair share of taxes. So I think the party's trying, to highlight what's really going on, underneath all of the, well, a lot of it's racist propaganda against Mayor Johnson. We've seen this for people my age. We've seen this before when Mayor Washington was first elected. There was a huge onslaught, personal racist attacks on him. And we're seeing it reprised with the situation with Mayor Johnson.
And Bernard, Texas, what's going on in Houston?
Well, it's normally hot here anyway, but politically, it's really hot. I mean, right now, we have Houston is a bastion of Democratic power, Democratic Party power, and it's important for the capitalist class to destroy that. And the noose has been tightening. In the last election, Democrats and progressives lost by 4 more points than they did the year before. And they put in a Democratic mayor who, in all but name, is actually a Republican. And he's cooperating with ICE, etc. But the biggest issue in Texas right now, of course, the redistricting. Trump gave the Governor Abbott a phone call and asked him, we're in special session right now. And what they're doing is they're going to redraw 5 districts, Democratic districts, and break them up to make sure that Trump can keep his majority, in the next election. So it's extremely undemocratic. We've had demonstrations all over the city. The AFL-CIO is getting ready to call for a demonstration in a couple of weeks. So when I say it's hot here.
When you say call for a demonstration that the AFL-CIO, you mean those bus stores? Is the bus store coming to Houston?
Is it? I'm sorry?
The
Is it
bus
what?
tour. The AFL-CIO is organizing bus tours around the country. You haven't heard
Yes.
about that?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. But we're having
That
actual demonstrations here dealing with the redistricting as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And Pooja, that bus tour is not coming to Colorado. This is a little bit far.
A little bit far, but no less hot over here in temperature or in organizing. I think there's a lot of ICE activity that's going on over here, so there's a lot of people ramping up to fight against that, doing a lot of just helping out neighbors, a lot of know your rights trainings. I think folks are also trying to organize within the boundaries that they have. I think we're seeing a little bit of a response from the bosses in terms of how they're responding in, grievance and negotiations. And they're certainly, I think following the lead of what's happening nationally and acting like they don't have to, pay attention to workers' rights quite as the way that they used to. Along with Trump starting to put starting to assign people out to the NLRB, and I think there's a real attack on workers' rights happening right now that I think is being felt, and from a number of different angles. So I think same as happening in Chicago and in Houston, a lot of people are starting to self-organize. A lot of stuff is starting to pop off, and I think you're seeing a reaction from the bosses that I think we should start to anticipate growing hotter as well, as they feel more. I think they feel more legitimized to behave the way that they do, and to really fight against workers and organizing over here.
Thank you very much. Well, there seems to be a lot happening, and that's good. Um, and that's important because they're calling for this strike on August the 9th. And the success of any movement depends on the conditions that are existing on the ground and how people are responding to it. Now, Bobby, you're active in the labor movement in Chicago, and you have a sense of what's taking place nationally. I know that the Labor Commission had a big meeting last night, and you were discussing precisely these kinds of things. So what's your estimate of how the labor movement is responding, and does it meet the needs of the times, in your opinion?
Well, I guess, how is the labor movement responding? The labor movement is not just the leaders of the AFL-CIO or of different unions. The labor movement is workers anywhere working, collaboratively, whether they're in a recognized union or not. And I think that people are still struggling with how to do that, especially in this time where some of the rights that we had are being eliminated, rights to organize and so on. I think the AFL-CIO is struggling to mobilize at the same time where there's not unity in the rank and file about how to see things. So that's why this bus tour, I think, is taking place. There's been calls for national demonstrations. There's a lot of support for a national demonstration in Washington, D.C. to confront the MAGA agenda. To me, the unity point that is really possible is to take on this big, ugly bill that has been passed by Congress. And as its results begin to be felt, I think that everything that it calls for, especially the cuts in Medicaid and child care, are going to be felt. So that's where I see that unity can be built.
Now, when you say see things differently in the labor movement and in the broader working class, you're talking about the relative strength of the Trump forces as compared to other uh, democratic sections of the labor movement. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, we have to recognize that even among the rank and file, there's not unity about opposing Trump, although the majority is there, but there's certainly not, there's a lot of confusion. There's the impacts of racism. There's the impacts of the anti-immigrant propaganda that's been going out. And so I think that it's a real challenge to have a unified labor movement and to have a unified fight back.
Pooja, what about in your area of work? You work with public workers, right? Are you seeing the same kinds of trends that Bobby has just talked about?
Yes, and I think we're also seeing a lot of helplessness because I think, public sector workers, even at the state or county level, a lot of their funding is tied to national funding and federal funding. And so I think there's a lot of fear that's being felt among the workforce of public sector workers, regardless of what level of public sector you're at. And of course, a lot of like county and city and state public sector workers are also married or in relationships with or have family who are federal public sector workers. And so all of the tumultuousness that's occurring at the federal level with public sector workers, I think, is also having that trickle down, intended effect of fear and hopelessness. So I think we're both seeing people becoming more agitated, wanting to spend more money on PAC, right, or PAF, which is the way that union members spend, can donate to political action funds, right? If folks don't know, union dues can't be used for political expenditures. You have to do a separate dues payment outside of your normal union dues payment to give money to political funds, right? So it's a different name in different unions, but we are definitely seeing, I think, a trending up of people giving more money to try and help things in the electoral field as well. So I think it's twofold, right? Like it is that a lot of people are freaked out by what's happening. I think understandably, they're seeing their rights getting cut. They're seeing, their employers responding by not acting in good faith at the negotiation table. They're seeing their employers respond by threatening to cut departments and sending really scary letters and emails, I think, saying, well, we just don't know what the impacts on the budget are going to be over the next year or over the next quarter. We don't know. We may have to lay off X amount of people. And so I think everything is just in a heightened sense of we don't know what's going to happen. And that's not a great place for organizing, as you might imagine, because often being stuck in these places of just not being sure of what's happening can make people sort of freeze, right? They don't know whether they should take a step. They don't know whether they shouldn't take a step. And so it's really, it is a moment for organizers to really tap into that, I think, depending on what, if you're a union organizer, a political organizer, whatever, it's a real moment for you to start being a point and a voice of hope, I think, for folks. And so I think it's important for people in the party and for people in the labor movement in general to just be cognizant of what we can bring to the working class as a whole, right? So in general, people look at leaders like us to provide them, I think, with a sense of like, what should we be doing? But I think it's really, really heightened right now. So it's really important for us to really be we might be feeling doomed, we might be feeling whatever in our own homes and our own thought process. But I think the way that we talk to people and the way that we show up for workers and the working class, I think we have to really have a sharp analysis about exactly where we're at and exactly how we can win. And I think, to bring back to this point of this, I'm sure you'll talk about this later, Joe, so I don't want to take away your point here, but the August 9th action, it's really soon. It's really soon, and it's a lot of work to organize a general strike. And I'm excited to see these organic points of people wanting to rise up and wanting to take action. But I think, we'll talk about this probably at some point. But to me, this moment is about organizing, just like every moment. But this one specifically, it's like, how do we build to a majority and a rising majority, or even like a really sharp vocal minority that's strong and will stay together? How do we build to that to really make impact versus just like stop shopping somewhere or something like that? The moment's really coming where we're going to have to take some really bold action. And I think we have to work to that because we're not to Bobby's point, we're not where we need to be acting towards anything in solidarity, really.
So there needs to be deep organizing with some very specific objectives in mind, and we can't be all doomsayers. We got to be objective and optimistic, and rally people in the course of the struggles that we're involved in, and they're deep. I mean, the federal workers, I think they fired something like 1 million federal workers. A
So,
million.
Joe, I think what's
And then,
missing, sorry,
go
what's
on.
missing here is we've seen federal workers demonstrate, postal workers demonstrate this. And that. What we need are people showing up for other people, not just for themselves.
I'm glad
And
you
I
raised
think
that
that
point.
that can come from the base, from the rank and file. We need non-immigrant workers showing up for immigrant work, and we're seeing some of that, to be honest. But I get to go back to your original question. I get a little tired of people talking about what is the labor movement doing, so as if we're sitting back here critiquing what the leaders are doing. We're all the labor movement. Did I call up my friends Janet and Lakeisha, who work with me, and say, let's go to this demonstration for immigrant workers, or let's make sure that our co-worker Carmen, if what are we going to do if ICE shows up in our plant? But those are the way we organize, not call for a general strike, which is very amorphous. It doesn't organize anybody, but we need to find the answers. And to me, the issue right now is showing up for other people.
Well, I'm glad you raised the point, showing up for other people, because that's precisely where I want to go. And if Bernard, you could talk a little bit about this in relationship to the work that you see in Houston, because one of the things that is very troubling to me, and I don't mean to be not optimistic, but that the protests that have taken place since March against MAGA have been largely white, you know, and you don't see many black folk, you don't see many Latinos, you don't see many Asian Americans. In fact, I was at a No Good Trouble demonstration in New York last week, and I don't know, maybe there were 1,000 or 2,000 people, but it looked to me like it was as important as it was. I ain't trying to diss it, but it looked to me like a gathering of 1960 anti-war activists, mainly white, mainly senior citizens. Is the same thing happening in Texas, and Bobby posed the right question, people showing up for other people? What's your sense of things?
Well, I think, of course, obviously, we have to show up and support other groups. The whole idea of building a united front against fascism is not just saying we endorse you, but going there and to build personal relationships, especially with the leaders of other organizations, and to organize them into larger coalitions that work together. And we're in the process of doing that here in Houston. I mean, the main thing, in my opinion, always is the role of the Communist Party. If the Communist Party was like it was, say, in the late 30s or in the early 40s, when the party had 70 to 80,000 members and had leadership in about 33% of the trade unions, things would be a little bit different right now. The MAGA forces have been very successful in the ideological campaign in splitting the working class over racism, uh, homophobia, immigration, etc. They've been very successful, and they're very sophisticated, and they have a lot of money to do it on the radio and the TV and everything else. We need to counter that. The role of communists should be, and I think the role of communists is critical to winning this struggle, because the more communists we have in unions and in leadership and in mass organizations, the better the fight back will be. But the role of communists, first and foremost, is to have a backbone, to be optimistic. Always, when people are in despair, we have to be optimistic, not overly, but we have to be realistically optimistic. And we have to have a backbone, and we have to be in the front ranks. And we have to recruit into the party. During the No Kings March, we had 25,000 people here in Houston, one of the largest demonstrations we've had. We set up a table. We signed up 104 people into the party, on the mailing list of the party. And since then, we recruited quite a few of them. The role of the party, if you don't build the party and we leave it up to everyone else, we're going to lose. And When Trump was elected, it was a tsunami. And as you know, in a tsunami, the water goes in and destroys everything. At a certain point, it stops and it recedes. This tsunami under Trump is still going on. Our job, even though we're in retreat, is to fight back. It's like holding a car back, as it pushes forward. It's going to keep pushing you back, but you have to have resistance. You have to rally people, because the more you rally people, the slower their progress is, even though they're making progress.
And let me ask you, is the party doing that in Houston? I
You
mean,
bet.
and have you seen any results, or are these demonstrations still largely white?
Yes. Well, of course.
Or is the Mexican American community getting involved? The Black community? And what is the party? I know you're involved in some community organizations in Houston. What's it called? The People's Organization for
Well,
Progress or something like that?
I'm in Texas Organizing Project, which
Yeah,
has
just
300.
organizing project.
It has 350,000 members. It's the most radical and militant civil rights organization in Texas. And we are under attack even by the federal government right now because of the amount of organizing we do in getting the vote out. To us in Texas, we have a goal: turn Texas blue. If we can turn Texas blue, it is the linchpin in the Neo Confederacy, the base of the fascists. And the rest of the states, Mississippi through Florida, will fall. And that is a major one of our goals. And we're doing it with civil rights, labor, the peace movement, etc. But again, I want to say, if you want to change things, build the Communist Party.
So
If you
I'd
don't,
like to, can
Let
I
me
butt
let
in
me
here?
let me interject here just for a moment, because I'm Bobby. I'm coming straight to you next.
Okay.
You're
I'm ready
you're
to pick
next.
a fight. I'm ready to pick a fight with Bernard.
You ready? You ready? We're going to have a comradely, constructive conversation. But Bobby, this is an important point. I've been making the point in the party that while this trend existed around the country since March, these MAGA protests being largely white in composition, there were important exceptions. May Day was an important exception around the country that I'm aware of, and it was an important exception because the labor movement and the immigrant rights movement uh, turned out, organized, showed up in a big way, and they brought their membership. And so the racial and gender composition of these marches was much improved. The same thing was true in New York in March. There was a demonstration that was called by Working Families Party and a community group in Brooklyn and around the greater metropolitan area called Make the Road by Walking. It was a labor community alliance that made it happen. And this was an anti-Doge protest. And it too, uh, was significantly much better than all these other marches in terms of composition. And so Bobby, when you bring labor and the community to the table, it makes a big difference, right? Don't you agree with that? And if that can be done, what concrete, practical steps can our party make to build on Bernard's point in making a difference in terms of bringing these forces to the table, and thereby changing the entire dynamic of these struggles as they unfold?
So,
Bobby.
yeah, thank you. Like I said, I had a fight to pick with Bernard here. I don't think the role of communists is just to be, the main role is to be optimistic. That's important. Our contribution is to develop tactics that unify the people. And that is not easy. There's no just do this or just do that. We don't know how to solve this challenge right now. I don't think we should pose it as, and I'm not saying anyone did, as a question of too many white people coming out. It's great that they came out. Why don't we have the unity to bring the other forces too? What's preventing that? And I think there's a number of things. if you compare May Day with the John Lewis Day demonstration and the other ones, at least in Chicago, were these forces brought in from the beginning? Did they get to say what the goals were? Did they get to say how the tactics were? No, they were invited to be the speakers, after the fact, but not to be part of the planning. So that might be one thing, but I think we have to, I'm all for demonstrations. They're great. But what I'm more interested in are these local ones in little Mount Prospect, Illinois, and Rockford, and little towns and cities. I think those point us to some tactics of unity. We should look back to the 40s when communists, when somebody got evicted, organized a crowd and moved people back into their homes. Those are the kind of things that build trust, build community, and go back to that idea of showing up for people. Those are the kind of tactics that I think that the Communist Party has to contribute to developing, especially right now on some critical, and I think it's happening with defending immigrant rights and other things, that we have to popularize that so that people, all of us, maybe we're not great leaders, we're not elected union presidents or something, but each of us work somewhere and we talk at lunchtime to 4 or 5 people. Can we get those 4 or 5 people to come out to a demonstration or see about somebody who's in trouble, somebody from a different group or profession, and build trust and the movement in that kind of way? If you get to that point, then you can start talking about a general strike where there's clumps of people in every workplace who trust each other and look to each other for leadership.
Pooja, what do you think about the point that Bobby's making? I mean, you have to, you got to do more than send an email, right? You got to do more than make a phone call. You have to physically go to the Central Labor Council meeting, or go to the union halls, or go to the faith-based organizations and begin having a conversation about what are the issues, what are the problems, and then where can we find common ground, and then how can we build coalitions that incorporate your needs as well as ours and move this whole thing forward. And that isn't happening enough, is it?
Well, I think, there's a lot of fear right now too, right? With ICE just kind of openly hanging out and acting like, an agency to get rid of whoever they don't like or whoever they don't agree with, right? So I think there is some amount of fear also in terms of the Black and brown community. Like, do we come out to these protests? Like, is that dangerous for us, right? And so how do you overcome a fear like that, right? Like, you build a relationship of trust with people. So to Bobby's point, talking to the people that you talk to at your lunch table, talking to people you go out on smoke breaks with, these are how we've always built these bonds of community and these bonds of trust, right? Organizing and power is really about trust. You build power by building relationships and building trust. So how do you do that? You talk to people, you get to know them, you talk to the people that you already have these existing relationships of trust and friendship with, which most people have, even if you don't think about it, right? That's something as a union organizer, you're always telling people, like, people are like, I don't know, I don't talk to people. And it's like, I don't think that's actually true, right? Like, who do you talk to about what's going on in your workplace? Who do you talk to about what you had for lunch? Who do you talk to about what's going on with your kids, right? Those are the people that actually, like, I think we feel uncomfortable talking about politics or uncomfortable talking about workplace conditions and stuff with, but those are the people actually that you have that inherent built in trust and camaraderie with already. So those are the people that you should be starting to have these sorts of conversations with. I think in general, there is this tendency on the left to sort of regard purity or the the completion of your leftist radical thought in order for me to be able to talk to you about my own radical thought. But I challenge that notion. I don't think that's correct, and I don't think that's how we build actual solidarity, right? You have to get over that fear of being able to talk about the things that are important to you. You have to get over the fear of, like, what is this person going to respond to me about if I talk about how I'm being impacted under this wave of MAGA fascism, like how this is impacting me and my family? You have to be willing to talk about these things, but it can be really scary if you've never done something like that, right? So actually, I think partly also what the party should be focused on, and I always think this anyway, so forgive me if you've heard me say this before, but we should be teaching people how to be comfortable talking about their ideology. We should be teaching people how to have conversations about their conditions. And it can be really easy also to just say, go out and talk to people, right? But if you've never done that, if you've never practiced it, right? One thing we do a lot in organizer training, union organizer training, is to do role plays, right? So to do role plays of just how do you have this conversation with these people that you may not have ever had a political conversation with before? How do you even get your foot in the door to have that conversation? So there's a lot that I think the party in general can be, and party members, I think, can be providing to the working class right now. But to me, it's really always about how do you build power and trust through the connections that you have.
Thank you. And Bernard, back to you. What's your response, and how are these issues playing out in Houston, and what kind of an effect will they have on this demonstration on August the 9th? And will you be there?
Well, yes, we'll be there. The party will be there. The party will defy the laws against us in Texas. We will be there. We'll have books. We'll sign people up. We'll build the party. We may even have speakers. We work sort of semi-underground, of course, in Texas. A lot of our members are not public. But I don't disagree with what everyone else is saying. All of this stuff is important. But, I've always said there's three areas of struggle in Marxism. There's the ideological, which is extremely important. That's what we're talking about, how to talk to people on one-to-one basis, the actual training. And extroverts do better than introverts. We have to be realistic about how we do it, because it's not just an art, it's a science. And then we have the economic struggle, which of course is mostly the trade union, but it's the redistribution of wealth. I mean, I don't think people understand. Today, a CEO makes 285 times more than the average worker. That's 18.9 million a year in total compensation. In 1965, the ratio was 21 to 1, and today it's 285. This growth in wealth leads toward fascism, because the more you have to lose. And that's what we have right now. And this is the base of what's going on. And the third struggle, of course, is the electoral struggle. The Communist Party needs to run more candidates. We've had 2 people in Texas elected, and that's a state where it's illegal for us to even run. And we've run 5 or 6 candidates. We had one candidate who lost, but got 265,000 votes. That's what the Communist Party
I
does here
remember
in
that.
Texas under difficult conditions. But the electoral struggle is about state power. It's about who can legislate in favor of the trade unions and in favor of immigrants, of women, etc., or how you can stop bills. And it's extremely important. And a lot of party members, I think, have some of this anarcho-communism in it, where they're not willing to build a broad people's front with progressive Democrats and other people. And this has to be overcome. And this is an ideological struggle, not just with the working class, but inside the party itself.
Which says, okay, you're going to be there on the 9th, and the party's going to be there, and that's great. We should always go where struggle is taking place. That's where we need to be. No question about that. But the issue is how many people will be there, and how wide and how effective this issue will be. Bobby, which brings us squarely to the issue of this concept of general strike. General strike. Now, you know that historically, we've had some experience in the United States with general strikes. There was, number one, the general strike of the slaves that helped defeat the Confederacy. In fact, the historian W.E.B. Du Bois said if it hadn't been for the slaves throwing down their tools and joining the Union Army, that war might not have been won. And then there was the Seattle 1919 general strike, and others that had big effect around the country. The concept comes out of Europe, comes out of the syndicalist movement and some anarchist features of it. I remember reading that Marx and Engels weren't all that crazy about the idea as it was put forward by Bakunin and others. But that said, over the course of the last 150 years or so, um, uh, the idea has matured and developed, and well, or let's say it has evolved. Um, and so I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Bernard. Will you be participating in that August the 9th strike action? And what do you think calls for a general strike as they are emerging right now say about the state of the fight back and the state of the labor movement and the democratic movement generally? Bobby?
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm retired, so you could say I'm on strike every day. But I don't. If I was still at work, I don't think I would be in a position to just take off work by myself on August the 9th. Or even encourage two or three of my coworkers to do that. If we're not, because what is the point of a general strike? I mean, a strike stops the flow of profits. So if you could impact the economy and put pressure on the capitalist class along those lines for something, let's say if we could have a general strike in the United States to demand the repeal of Trump's big ugly bill, if we built the base to do that, that would be a powerful thing. I don't think we're there yet. I wanted to throw something else into the conversation, though. Well, okay, so the point of a general strike is either to make a political demand, and to stop the flow of profits. But aren't we thinking of it kind of narrowly? Like, we don't live in a national economy anymore. The Seattle general strike was effective because in those days, a region was an economic thing. But today we live in a world economy. So if we're going to have a general strike, why don't we start talking about stopping or interrupting the chains of supply chains around the world? Why aren't we looking at our coworkers in other countries and who work for the same companies, who are exploited by the same companies, and think about some kind of an international movement in those realms? I think that kind of a challenge would raise the consciousness of people all over as to the international capitalist class that we're really up against.
But there have been strikes in other countries, Pooja, like, for example, in India over the last several years. There were those general strikes that started off, Pooja, among the farmers, and then spread to urban workers, and they were huge. Um, uh, uh, and those strikes, Pooja, emerged out of very specific conditions. In fact, all strikes do. They're not calls for a strike in the abstract, are they?
No, and I think there are also things to consider, right? For example, to Bobby's point about being in a position to be able to go on strike when she was working, most people's health insurance in this country is tied to their job, right? And most people need health insurance, right? So to suggest that you go out on strike is to then suggest that you potentially lose your ability to take care of yourself and your health or your family's health. So that's a big consideration for a lot of people in places, particularly where you see a lot of general strike or strike activity. France, a lot of those places have collective healthcare systems, right? So a lot of those things are already taken care of. The baby has lots of thoughts about strikes as well right now. Yeah, so I think that to Bobby's point, right? Like the Seattle strike is a great example. I've been thinking about it too because it was regional, right? Like they went through, they created meal kitchens for people. People were cooking for other people. That when people call for general strikes, I always think that you don't really know exactly what goes into a strike, right? Like, have you ever been on strike? Or have you ever taken folks on strike? Because what it actually means is taking care of people's food, taking care of people's rent payments, taking care of people's everything you need to live your life and pay your bills has to be taken care of, or just live, right? Like to eat. All of those things have to be taken care of by the workers, by the working class, by the people. So to me, actually, I get very annoyed by these calls for a general strike all the time because you don't think about the deep needs that people have when you're just calling for willy-nilly general strikes. It is going to take so much organizing and really creative ways of thinking about how do you impact the world economy the way that Bobby's talking about, because of the fact that we do live in a global economy now, because of the fact that like my work is dependent on what's happening in somebody's work somewhere else, right? Everything is connected. And we just simply cannot in this country impact the economic system the way that we need to by just trying to do a 1 day, for example, general strike in 2 weeks, right? It's not enough. That said, I don't want us to like poo-poo all over the thing that's rising, which is like this desire for mass action, this desire for collective solidarity. So to me, it's like, how do we think about actually utilizing the people who are interested in doing tactics like this, and like how do we get to a point where in this country we could do some sort of mass disruption of these systems? We're just not there yet.
Bernard, what do you think? I mean, I think Pooja is making some very strong points. I mean, on the one side, people have great instability in their lives. They're under constant threat. They have real problems. They have families. They need health care, they got bills to pay, mortgages to pay, so on and so forth. Then they're under direct threat from the state and from being laid off, and so on and so forth. And then you have the issue of the organization of the strikes themselves and everything that goes into it, which means that you better have a pretty big strike fund if you're getting ready to go out. And these strikes take place around concrete issues, healthcare, speed up on the shop floor, wages, automation, break time, so on and so forth. Now, I remember the other day, Bernard, you said in a meeting that while we should support the concept of a strike in general, that our goal has to be to work amongst the unorganized to build support for such an action, if I remember what you said correctly. But my question to you is, what would be the issues, and who gets to determine that? Does the party call for a strike, or is this the sole and exclusive province of the trade unions, in your opinion?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm not disagreeing with what everyone else is saying, but I think we have to see it in context. And while it's difficult for people to go on strike because of health care, because of everything else they have, they're in the process of losing it if they don't go on strike. That's what the big bill is about. That's what fascism is about. But there's no harm in calling in sick for a day or two. That's what we're asking people to do. But I also agree that it is sort of frustrating to see people call for a general strike nilly willy. It's who's doing this? The strike should be called by the trade union movement, and they should be called because they're the ones that are at the base of organizing it, having the strike funds and everything else. So I sort of agree with people, but also it's the role of communists to support rebellion and to support the fight back wherever it can, even though sometimes it's doomed. A great example was in Russia, when they had the July days. The Bolsheviks said it's too early to do it. It's going to fail, but we're going to support the working class. So I think, again, the major question here is the role of the Communist Party. And no, we should not call a strike. We have 20,000 members. We don't have enough power. Our power has to be working within broad coalitions in the trade union movement, civil rights, immigration, etc. By the way, the first general strike nationwide was 1877, and it was the communists in St. Louis that actually led to the temporary overthrow for several days of the bourgeoisie, and it was put down by federal troops. And over 100,000 workers were involved in this. 100 were killed. And then that 1919 strike, that was the organizing of 24 different unions, in Seattle. That included about 350,000 workers, but it did not win. And the latest strike, the biggest strike to happen in U.S. history, was back in, it was 1959, 1960. And that lasted 116 days and included 500,000 workers. And that was the steel strike. And it was affecting 85% of steel production came to a halt. And Eisenhower destroyed it by bringing in the Taft-Hartley Act, which we seem to have forgotten about. The big, beautiful bill is one thing. The Taft-Hartley Act is what really enslaves the labor movement. So, we have to go back to getting rid of that bill because that bill still exists and it's extremely undemocratic. So, yes, let's support strikes. But, again, let's be careful in calling it. We have the strike being called in 2028 that Shawn is calling from the UAW. And that gives people time to organize and to do it. They're trying to get all the contracts to be organized to end on the same day to help unify. That's a great idea if it works. And it's going to take place on May Day, which to me shows a higher consciousness in the labor movement than in the past.
Which presupposes that we have a labor movement to go on strike in 2028. But at the rate things are going, my friend, my comrade, I ain't sure about that.
You're right.
Bobby,
But
last word. What do you?
As long as there's a working class, there will be a labor movement.
Yes, but whether it will be able to operate legally, call strikes, engage in collective bargaining, that's not so clear. I mean,
well, that's
already again, Trump has fired 1 million federal workers, and then just to, put dessert on the top of that cake, he violated the collective bargaining rights of the rest of the workers. And if they do that to federal workers, they're coming for workers in the private sector.
Let's just remember that the NLRA and the NLRB were a compromise, and they were created for a reason.
Trump had to pull back the National Guard in Los Angeles because when they were trying to repress or trying to support the ICE activities, because those working class people were not reliable in taking up arms against their brothers and sisters. So I don't think that all is lost, Joe.
No, all is not lost. I'm not arguing that all is
part of the labor movement too.
You never heard me say all is not lost.
I know.
What I am trying to say is that if this 50-51 movement is to survive and grow stronger, that want to talk about the role of the party, that the role of the party has to be in conjunction with other organizations to try to bring the labor movement more fully into the fight. To try to bring the labor movement and the faith community, and in my experience, that's the Black church, into the fight, and because without that, it seems to me that, the prospects of this particular edition of the anti-MAGA fight back are not as bright, and it will not be as strong as it could be. And the main thing that we have to do now is to use all of these struggles to prepare for the upcoming midterm elections.
And
You
put the
know,
screws on those Republican congressmen who are voting against their constituents. We have to move from being a general struggle into specifically targeting those people who are betraying who they represent. And I think that tactic will lead us to build the kind of coalition that we're looking for, rather than a general thing against MAGA or Trump or whatever. Let's go after those individual traitors.
well, the next thing up, at least in New York City, will be a march on Wall Street on August the 28th. And then Labor Day around the country, you know, Labor Day protests around the country. The AFL-CIO says they're going to try to organize big militant protests. Good. We will be there. And all the while, let's do the deep organizing that Pooja has suggested in order to begin to prepare to build the kind of coalitions that would not only push back ICE like they did in LA, but push back MAGA from the school board, state assemblies, governorships, and from Congress in next year's election. Thank you all very much for this conversation about the state of the labor movement and the prospects for a wider and bigger, and maybe, hopefully sooner than later, a huge nationwide strike by the entire class. You think about it, it's a powerful idea. The question is how to get there. And while we're thinking about that and while we're acting as we are able, stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight. Until next week, we'll see you on another edition of Good Morning Revolution. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.